Houston beating Oklahoma City today feels like a defining win to me just because of the way they won it. Harden going 2 for 11 from 3, 5 of 16 from the floor. Eric Gordon going 0 for 10 from 3, 6 of 20 from the floor. Houston could not score efficiently tonight, and yet it was their defense that won them that game. Harden not getting a bucket with him off the floor at one point, late third, early fourth. The defense just turned it up as part of that run. Every guy in that roster, Harden included, was just playing so hard on defense with their swarming style, real aggressive, perfect rotations. Talk about a connected defense that hustles, man. And while that was happening with Harden off the floor and Russ still out, Harden and Russ were the two biggest cheerleaders on the sidelines, rooting for what was happening. This looks like a team that is playing together and understands who they are and what they have to do together to win. And that win today, to me, was a true team victory. We see Houston win so often with Harden, or in recent years with Harden and Paul, or this year Harden and Westbrook. But this was an all-around team victory that says a lot about what this team is right now and what it can be in potential future series, maybe against the Lakers.
Well, and I'll tell you, Kevin, if you would have told me James Harden goes 5 for 16, 2 of 11 from 3, and Eric Gordon goes 6 of 20, 0 for 10, I would have told you that they got smashed. To your point.
Yeah.
Like the fact that they won that game, and they won the game going away. They won the game by double digits. Yeah. They won the game by double digits with those two things being possible. I mean, now, look, there's some stuff happening that is, I remember D'Antoni actually saying this, talking about this earlier he was talking about this earlier in the bubble, and he was talking about being in the same gym, having the same depth perception. You're not traveling to different gyms every night. That is actually good for shooters, he thought. That it does benefit shooters. We've got to admit, okay, so there was some real regression tonight with the Harden numbers and the Gordon numbers, but like there's not with these other guys, and you do wonder, like, come on, man. I mean, PJ Tucker's 4 of 4 from 3. Jeff Green's 3 for 6. Robert Covington's 2 for 5. Austin Rivers is 3 for 6. I mean, the percentage that these guys are, they were in the third quarter of game 1, and they said their bench was shooting 80%. 80% at that time with McLemore and Green and the rest. And it's like they have really shot out of their minds. And you wonder, is that sustainable? But that is their randomness. If you shoot it 55 times from 3, the nights that you make a bunch of them and shoot a good percentage, you're going to win going away. And the nights that you miss, you're just going to lose. Like, I mean, it is. And so can you do it 4 times? Well, they've done it twice. You know what I mean? They've done it twice already.
It like what you're talking about shows the importance of how team personnel and system interact. And we're seeing guys on this team who previously were cast aside. Jeff Green was waived this year. Ben McLemore has been let go several times. Daniel House was an undrafted player. Robert Covington was a late pick, has gone through multiple teams. PJ Tucker played 5 years overseas before becoming a player. So many of these guys on that team have fallen into a system that just highlights their strengths and really empowers them to do what they do best. And that's play hard on defense and shoot threes. It's a simple game, but I think that makes their lives a bit easier too.
I actually had a discussion with my friend about this the other day because, look, I've covered and watched many games played by both Ben McLemore and Jeff Green, and watching them in this Houston system and watching them playing is beyond perplexing. I watched these guys play a lot. Okay, these guys were awful.
Yeah.
Okay, and here's what I think. I think both of those guys have an interesting caveat to them. That if you ever talk to other players and you see other players tweeting and whatever, all those
about Jeff Green today. A lot of guys tweeted about Jeff Green.
Jeff Green is the biggest sweetheart in the world. I cannot stand watching him play basketball, but he's a sweetheart. He's a great guy. All right. I tell you this, the other one is McLemore. So all these guys in the NBA, they all think Jeff Green's really good, and they all think Ben McLemore's really good. And I think part of it is, guess what? A lot of them, they all play in the summers. And these guys are really good, right? Houston is more like playing in the summer and flying up and playing pickup than anything we have in the NBA. And so I was telling my buddy, I was like, maybe that's just it. That if you put them in a real offense, I don't want to take away from what they do, but it's not like the same. It's not structured where a coach is telling you, be there, mad if you don't know the plays, because Ben would constantly not know where to be on offense and defense. But if you can just play, you're just running up and down. Nobody gives a shit what shots you take. Like, nobody's yelling at you if you take a bad shot, right? And you're just flying up and down the court and playing. I was like, maybe that's why all these guys think these guys are good, because when they play against them, they are good because they're just flying up and down. That's really how Houston plays. I mean, shit, they play like my son plays on 2K, where I'm like, will you throw it down to the post like once and just get a buck? He's just fucking firing off threes, right? Every time, trying to get the little green thing to show up. But I that's my theory. My theory is that they would go back to looking how those guys have looked if they had to play in some kind of a system, or if they played in some kind of structure. But the fact that it is so unstructured and just fly up and down, it really does accentuate what they are good at, and makes me realize why other players think those guys are good, even though I watch them and think they're not.
It's unstructured in some ways, but it's also so structured in other ways that it makes it easy for them to just know what they're going to do, whether it's just flying up the court, as you're saying, or whether it's just stand in the corner and shoot spot up threes, and don't worry about like looking for the next pass, just shoot. Like, every player on that team is empowered to shoot the ball. There's no thought of like, what am I supposed to do? It is shoot or attack the basket. And if it's not a layup, then kick out. It is such a simple game for a lot of guys that it makes their life easier.
It's very reminiscent to me of watching, like, in college football. Mike Leach is one of my favorite coaches, and you would watch his teams, and they were throwing it 70 times before everybody else was. And they had like 5 plays, right? They ran like 5 plays, and like obviously it changed college football, like all the spread stuff changed the way football was played, even up to the NFL level, now on some in some ways. And I do think that it's like, okay, who's gonna stymie this? Because Oklahoma City, like, they're not punishing them for playing small at all. They're not punishing them at all. And Houston is burying these threes. And so when they do, they're devastating. And when they don't, that's when everybody says, geez, you can't win doing this and whatever else. The same way it goes in football with the spread, right? Like, as soon as somebody gets beat with the spread and starts having a lot of 3 and outs and putting their defense on the field 100 times, then everybody's like, see, can't win like that, at the biggest level. And that's really what this reminds me of. But when it's clicking, it's devastating. There's no way around it.
For sure. And ultimately, they are built in many ways to make this potential next series against the Lakers a very difficult one for LA, with the way Houston does play and with the way they defend, with the versatility that they have. Because you mentioned their lack of size. Thus far, the small ball experiment, to me, is working in the sense that there's been very few times that I'm looking at Covington or Tucker or even Jeff Green and I'm like, oh, they got beat because they're smaller. They play bigger than they are, especially Tucker and Covington do, with the way they protect the rim, with the way they aggressively box out and attack the glass. I mean, these guys might be listed at 6'6", 6'7", 6'5" for Tucker, but they don't play like that. And I do look forward to that potential Lakers series and seeing these really contrasting styles. Houston is contrasting to everybody because they're unique to themselves, but Houston's a threat. They are a threat.